Hi, Jarabelle here with Orlando, Florida Gardener. Today I'm going to be transplanting some sweet corn into this bed here and just talk about how to get corn to germinate successfully and why I'm growing it this way as transplants instead of direct sowing it into my garden bed. And I also have some full-sized corn here that I can show you and talk about. These are a little bit over 2 months old now. First time growing corn, so I definitely learned a lot with this batch right here. Um, I'll be talking about that as well, why it's all tied up and it fell over from a recent windstorm, so I definitely learned a lesson from that I won't be repeating with these. But first, let's talk about um, why I decided to grow them as transplants instead of direct sowing. So corn needs warm soil to germinate. If it's not warm, the little corn seeds will just sit in the soil and they'll stay there for a while and eventually just kind of rot away. I had a real big problem with that with this batch here. I started this corn February 6th by direct sowing. Now I'm in Orlando, Florida, zone 9B. It is pretty warm here. It doesn't really get cold, but the soil was still kind of cold. So I had really spotty germination, which is not good when you're trying to grow corn. Corn needs a nice solid block so it'll all cross-pollinate and give you ears the way that it should be, or cobs. So that spotty germination really messed this up for me a little bit, especially in the center. I tried over and over again to direct sow more seeds, but again, only a couple would come up, and I still have some spots in there. But the ones that did germinate, they're doing pretty good now. But I didn't want to repeat that. I wanted to make sure that things germinated this time, and I knew how many, so that way I could space them out properly throughout the bed. So this time I started them in a seed tray. Alright, so this variety is Silver Queen. It's very popular in Florida. A lot of people love to grow it. I can see why. It's grown very well. It's tall, 8-foot tall type corn. Comes to maturity at about 3 months. So that, like I said, it's over 2 months right now, starting to form some cobs, and I expect to be harvesting in about another month. This variety, however, is a specific variety bred from the University of Hawaii. It's a Hawaiian sweet corn. I believe it's number 9 or number 10, and it's a white silver sweet corn. Normally, I wouldn't be planting corn right now. It's April, the middle of April, and we're going to be hitting summer, really quick in June, where we get a lot of rain, a lot of bugs, so it gets really hard to kind of grow corn during the summer. But I wanted to fill this bed with something, and found this variety that is bred to grow more in more tropical environments. So I said, well, let me give it a try and just see how it does. It's also a 3 month or so variety that it takes from seed to harvest. So I started them in these in a seed tray. There's about 32 seedlings that popped up here to make sure that the soil was warm and that I would get almost 100% germination on this. I used a seed mat. This is the one that I used here. I put it under here, and I got it from Amazon. It was really cheap. But literally within 3 days, I started seeing the seeds germinating. So that's really quick for corn. Normally it takes 7 to 10 days without any kind of assistance. So that really helped and made sure that they germinated. Now these are about 3 weeks old. Corn, for the most part, doesn't like to be transplanted. You can actually get stunted corn growth by transplanting. They really do benefit better from direct sowing. But if you transplant them early, like I would say no more than waiting 3 weeks, they'll be okay. Transplant them early so that way you don't disturb the roots too much when you're taking them out of this tray and sowing them into the soil, and they'll be fine. So we're going to do that now, and I'll show you how I space the corn out. Before I plant anything though, I want to comment on how much fertilizer corn needs to be really successful. I'm going to spread 10-10-10 fertilizer all over this bed and work it in a little bit before I transplant the seedlings. And just to put it into perspective, I saw another YouTube video from Haas Tools, and they basically said corn you can fertilize so much, and you actually didn't fertilize it enough if the edges of the leaves haven't turned brown from over fertilization, basically being burnt from over fertilization. So that really put it in perspective for me. I have fertilized these so much and they have not browned up or anything. They look nice and green, so don't be afraid to fertilize your corn. It is important to fertilize them a lot. Corn is a relative of the grass family. They basically like a lot of nitrogen and water, so as long as you give it plenty of that, they're going to grow for you and not really need much else. So before we plant anything, I'm just going to broadcast some 10-10-10. I just do it randomly, just work it in there. Alright, so I sprinkled 10-10-10 fertilizer all over and kind of worked it in the soil a little bit. I have a 4-foot wide bed, so I decided to put in 4 rows. Over here I did 5 rows, and that's really pushing it. It made it really hard to throw fertilizer in between them, and to also spray with spinosad to keep the worms from eating my cobs and everything. So I feel better doing 4 rows this time. And I'm going to space these 10 inches apart. Typically for the big sized corn, that's like 8-foot sized corn, people say 12 foot, maybe, 12 inches, 1 foot, maybe 18 inches. But in this bed, I fertilize a lot. I have really good soil in here, and I know that it's going to get all the nutrition it needs. It's not going to compete with its nearby plants growing at 10 inches. These over here are growing 10 inches apart, and they're doing great. No problems there. The only thing is I wanted a little bit more spacing in between them. So I started pulling them out. There's really no easy way to do this, just be gentle. So I just kind of grab a seedling and shake it up a little bit. Just kind of pull them apart really easy. These are only 3 weeks old, like I said, so there's not a lot of root development. I mean, they do have some long roots, but it's still pretty easy to grab the whole plant without disturbing it too much. I mean, this is disturbing a lot, but they'll be okay once you push in the soil and water them in very good. I highly recommend don't go beyond 3 weeks. They're bigger, the root systems are a lot bigger, you'll definitely be disturbing them a lot more, and that could really stunt the growth of your corn. To get the spacing, I don't do it perfectly. I just kind of eyeball things, but I do have this stick that I've marked 5 inches. I use this for spacing for a lot of different vegetables. I kind of nailed in some nails in here, but you could easily just mark it with a Sharpie or something, just to kind of have something to eyeball things with. So I wanted to plant mine 10 inches. I took the stick and kind of rubbed the soil to make an indentation where all my rows are at, and then kind of eyeballed, digging a little hole every 10 inches. Alright, so I just kind of created 4 rows and made a hole 10 inches apart. And then I just lay down each seedling by its hole all around the bed, and then I go back through and fill them in, tuck them in really nice. With corn, you kind of want to push a little bit to make sure that the seedling stays and stands up straight. You don't want it to be very loose because it's going to grow a huge stalk and it'll fall over pretty easy. So you just want to kind of press them in place, make sure that they stay secure. Alright, so I've transplanted all of my seedlings in their holes. The last thing that's left is to water them in really good. If you don't like to water by hand, obviously put down drip tape in your rows before you plant your seedlings. I personally kind of like watering my plants. It gives me a chance to check them every day and kind of look at them. But then here in Florida, pretty much the whole summer it rains every day starting in June, and I really don't have to water the rest of the year. It's only now during about February, March, and April that it's just really, really dry. We don't get that much rain. So I don't mind it too much. But definitely, if you don't want to be hand watering, install your drip tape and everything before you put in your seedlings. Now that they're in, I'm just going to wait about a week just to let them settle in a little bit before I start fertilizing. At the beginning, since they're little babies, I'm going to start using fish emulsion to give them a lot of nitrogen at the beginning. Once they get about a foot tall, I start switching to just 10-10-10 or whatever balanced fertilizer you prefer. I do really, really like organic fertilizers. My favorite is Job's. I use that pretty much with everything else except my corn, because the corn, you can tell, like it really needs a lot of fertilization. So I use a 10-10-10 that's not organic, but it really gives them what they need in higher quantities. Alright, so here's corn that is a little bit over 2 months old. Again, this is the Silver Queen variety. I had a mishap over the weekend. We had some strong winds and it blew them all down. I totally wasn't prepared for that. Normally we get strong winds during hurricane season, not right now in April. So I just didn't think it was necessary, but it definitely is. It was much harder to stake this stuff up once it was already at this height than having something already in place to protect them and prevent them from falling over to begin with. So to stake them up, I used T-posts, one on each corner, and I literally just took some nylon string I got from Home Depot really cheap and strung it all over the place. For the new transplants that I just put in, I'm going to put in T-posts now and run some nylon, probably like a Florida weave style, like going in and out of the corn as they grow up, and that'll help secure them and totally prevent them from falling over in the first place. So I definitely learned my lesson with that. Now that these are 2 months old, the first thing that you're going to see is formation of the tassels. This is the pollen part of the plant. They come out first before you see the actual ears of corn or the cobs forming. So corn is wind pollinated. That's why it's important to have a nice thick block of them, so the pollen will all float throughout them and land on the silks of each ear of corn to pollinate. It's kind of hard to see the ears of corn because all this is kind of smashed together, but here's an ear forming, and there's some pieces of silk there. So this pollen here is going to float down and land on the silks to pollinate your ears of corn, and that's how you get a nice ear. Each and every strand of silk attaches to a spot on the cob where the kernel will form. So if you've ever had corn on the cob that was missing some pieces of corn kernels inside of it, that's because that particular piece of silk didn't get pollinated. So I'm kind of concerned, since it fell over and everything's kind of like on top of each other, that I'm not going to get proper pollinization, because it's hard for this pollen to kind of float in some of these spaces. I guess I'll find out in about a month or a month and a half when it's time to harvest how successful it was. But I definitely learned my lesson and will not repeat that with the new transplants. I also wanted to talk about pest management. Here in Florida, we have lots of garden pests. I don't like to spray chemicals at all. If I do, it's always something that's organic. I pretty much researched this and found that there's really no way to grow corn here without putting some kind of application or spray to prevent earworms. We have lots of worms. I deal with them with the zucchinis and squash, so I just knew that I was also going to deal with them with the corn. First I tried BT spray, which is an organic spray. It works really great with my zucchinis and squashes, cucumbers, and those kind of caterpillars that like to munch on them. But it didn't work so good with the corn earworms. They're a little bit different kind of a caterpillar. They like to sit inside of the stalks and eat the plant basically from the inside out. So BT didn't work that great when it came to corn. It helped a little bit. I could definitely see it was getting some damage, and the worms were eating the leaves and inside of the stalks, and the BT really wasn't helping that much. So I switched to this spinosad. It's Monterey Garden Insect Spray. I bought it from Amazon as well. It's also organic, but it has the added feature of it kills the caterpillars on contact, which BT doesn't do that. The caterpillars have to ingest it in order for it to work, but this kills them on contact and when they ingest. And this really works. Like, I haven't seen corn damage since I've applied this, and I've only applied it once. They're gone. It just rained a lot the last couple of days, so I'm going to do another application just to protect them and make sure that the worms don't eat up everything before I can harvest. And it was a little bit hard to apply this spray. I typically have a simple 2-gallon pump spray that I use, but again, this was really tight together and hard to get through. So I switched to this. It's really used up, but this is an ortho dial and spray hose end sprayer. It was like $10 at Home Depot. I use this on like my fruit trees and other things when I want to spray a lot of quantity of something on top of it. And this really just sprayed it really well, soaked everything. I knew everything was covered and I was good to go. So this is what I plan to use for my pest management with the corn. That's really the only pests that I've seen so far are the corn earworms. I haven't noticed anything else, thankfully, and it's growing really good and it works. Alright, so here you have it, how to start corn from seed and what it looks like when it starts growing bigger. Also some things to consider while your corn is growing, and pest management, fertilization. Also just wanted to throw in that I fertilize with 10-10-10 probably once every 3 weeks through its growing cycle once I get started with that. It's a lot, in my opinion, it's a lot of fertilizer, but they're doing great. I still haven't seen the burnt edges on the leaves. They're responding great to it without any kind of issues. So don't be afraid to fertilize your corn. I will definitely post some updates in about a month maybe to see where the cobs are in formation. I'm not sure if they'll be ready to harvest exactly at 3 months or maybe a little bit after that. And also just show the progress of the seedlings. Corn grows really fast. It's probably one of the coolest things I've ever grown. It's huge, impressive. Everyone likes to look at it. I like to walk through it. My son likes to play and hide in it. It's a lot of fun. I definitely encourage you to give it a try, and I hope you learned a lot. Thanks.